Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. Coming to you from the Long Valley Studio in Washington, Utah. I'm your host, Dave Markel, and this is episode 179. There's a moment we come back to again and again on this show. It's the moment after someone finally says it out loud, after the courage and after the risk of being believed or not believed. What happens next matters. Sometimes that moment opens the door to healing. Other times, it creates a second injury, one that didn't have to happen. My guest today, Dr. Asher Beckwith, who many simply know as Dr. Asher, has spent her life focused on that exact space. Not just the trauma itself, but the response to it. She speaks as a survivor. She also brings more than 2 decades of applied qualitative research and PhD-level scholarship to her work. But what makes her voice distinct is that she understands trauma as something that lives in the body and in the nervous system, such as the subtle shifts that most institutions still miss. Dr. Asher works with organizations including medical systems, law enforcement agencies, universities, legal professionals, and faith communities, helping them to respond to trauma in ways that don't unintentionally cause further harm. She challenges systems to move beyond slogans and into real responsibility, because the truth is, good intentions aren't enough. If a system doesn't understand trauma, it will repeat it. This week, Dr. Asher and I get honest about what that means, about power, disclosure, and about what survivor-centered leadership actually requires, and about the difference between appearing trauma-informed and embodying it. This one is important and full of great information. Here's Dr. Asher. Hey, SAS listeners, I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Asher. She's here in the studio with me today. Dr. Asher, I want to thank you for being here and welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Well, it's a great opportunity for me too. So thank you for doing this. So that my audience knows, Dr. Asher reached out to me through an email. She told me that she had found the show and that it resonated with her and that she had some not only important things to talk about with her own experience, but also she's writing a book. She's got a seminar coming up, and I'm going to ask her to talk about that as we go through this conversation. But Dr. Asher, if you could start off with telling us about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I am very excited to be here today. And where I'll start is that I am a survivor. I am focused, though, on healing. Typically not what people go through per se, but more so on healing. So what does it look like for us survivors to really heal from this experience? One of the things that I am doing is writing a book right now, as you mentioned. My book is based on both my personal and professional experience. And so professionally, I actually have been what's called a qualitative researcher for the past 26 years. And what qualitative researchers do is conduct interviews and focus groups, not to dumb it down or anything, but analyze that data and identify themes and patterns and things like that in that data. And so what I'm doing now is I'm merging some of that research experience that I've had with my lived experience and with 10 other survivors' lived experiences. The focus is on more of healing. So what do our healing journeys look like day to day? What does it actually mean to heal from this kind of an event? It's been a very interesting endeavor, and I have had the lovely opportunity of being able to create what I call the self-heal model, and that's a survivor-to-survivor model for healing from sexual trauma. I've been able to root that really in the survivors' experiences as well as my own lived experience. I think that speaks volumes to folks who have been through this the kind of experience because we get each other, right? There's some kind of inherent understanding of each other. And I feel like hopefully this will reach a lot of people and make a big difference in folks' lives because I really want them to know healing is possible and you're not alone in that process. I think there's a lot of shame and blame that is attached to this experience, not just from us, but also from society and the cultures in which we live in. And I just really want people to know that, look, you're not alone. I was alone through a lot of my healing journey. That's part of why I'm putting this out there, because I don't want anyone to have to go through the healing process alone like I have.
That is right up the alley of where this podcast is based. And I'm grateful that you contacted me, especially based on not only your lived experience, but your educational experience, in the sense that one of the points that I emphasize through this platform is the healing process. I mean, we're not just sitting here talking about rapes and sex assaults that we've been through, but what we're doing to heal. And you mentioned that community survivor to survivor contact. And again, exactly what this podcast is about. I'm hoping that the majority of my listeners, and I'm not trying to single people out, but that's who listens to this, is victims and survivors who are searching for ways to connect with other people who have similar stories. There's connections, even though each rape or sex assault is unique, there are commonalities in all of them. And there are commonalities in the way we respond and how the impacts affect our daily lives and what we do to heal. So having that one-to-one contact like you're talking about is so important and critical. I'm so glad you're here. You mentioned too, you've got a summit coming up. Tell us a little bit about that. We'll get that out right now so that people can be interested in hearing that. But later on, we'll talk about it some more, and maybe you can go into more detail so that people can find out where to sign up for that and be involved.
Great. Thanks so much for the opportunity to talk about it. It's the Soul Care for Self-Care Summit. It is for sexual trauma survivors and also those who care for them and are involved in their lives. So it can be family, friends, practitioners, law, any kind of folks who are involved in survivors' lives and supporting survivors. The summit is going to occur on March 14th, and it's going to be from 12 o'clock in the afternoon to 4:30 in the afternoon Eastern Time. There will be a recording available, so you are more than welcome if you are not able to make it on March 14th from 12 to 4:30. That's totally fine. We understand that. And there will be a recording available, and we ask for a donation for the recording so that we can continue to sustain this kind of work and keep broadening our horizons to be able to expand into other communities and host more summits.
That's awesome. I'm so thankful that you're doing it in a way that as many people as want to can join in with that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we on this show get the opportunity to broadcast that. And hopefully there are a lot of people who'll be interested in and sign up for that.
Thank you. It is free outside of the recording, so anybody and everybody is welcome. So if you want to do it for free, you would need to do it live. If you want the recording, then we just ask for a donation.
That's awesome. Yeah. Dr. Asher, you mentioned just a minute ago that you too have an experience of being a victim. I'm wondering, what are you able to tell us about that experience?
Yeah. Sadly, I'm actually a 4-time survivor. So I have lived through a lot of different kinds of experiences. But the one that I vocalize more is when I was 14. Sadly, I met someone who was a family friend. And over time, she would come to our house and hang out and eat and things like that. What ended up happening is that she groomed me. She is actually a pedophile. And I was brought into the grooming through her doing like taking me out to eat or helping me with my homework or really making like she was like a motherly kind of figure to me, someone that I could confide in and really trust. It started out with talking, particularly in her car, just sitting on my street and talking. And then it progressed from there to one day her reaching over and trying to give me hugs. And it was, feels kind of odd. And then there was another day where she took me out to eat. And I was going to spend some time with her because we had become good friends. And she had convinced my mom that I could go over, I could stay and spend the night. And so I went out to eat with her. And then we went back to a condo right outside of the DC area. And she worked in DC. So we went to a condo that was kind of repurposed as an office downtown in DC. She was showing me around and we were upstairs. And then she literally grabbed me and started to hug me and then started to kiss me. I turned and I just kind of felt this really uncomfortable, warm feeling, just almost like bubbling up in me. And literally, I turned and was trying to run down the steps to get away and just threw up everywhere. All the
Oh,
contents of my dinner all over the stairs. Then we took some time and we cleaned that up. And then later, she took me back to her apartment, which I was not feeling very comfortable with all of it, but she assured me that I'd be okay and that everything was okay, and then proceeded to violate me from there.
first of all, I want to express how sorry I am for that experience. I know that had a horrific impact on you and
Yeah.
probably affected you in a way that maybe even directed you to where you are today in
Yeah.
terms of your education and your hope to help other people heal. And I don't know that looking for a silver lining behind horrible things is necessarily the way to go, but in the sense that you are now helping other people
Yeah.
through your lived experiences, not
Yeah.
only that one, but all of them,
Hmm.
and understanding what that feels like and having that connection with other victims and survivors, I think is critical. There are people who can offer help and healing processes without having lived an experience. But I think for those of us who've lived through what you have, in the sense that, I too have been a victim of sexual contact in several ways and through multiple stages of my life, it makes a difference to hear from somebody who really knows what it feels like and has an ongoing impact in their lives that not only now is through a healing process, but reaching out to others. Thank you for
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that shared lived experience is really important, especially in helping each other to get through it, because really it's an experience unlike any other, right? Where you are violated to your core.
Right. It's unlike any other crime. It really is.
Yeah.
I'm appreciative of the fact that you're aware of that and that you are sensitive to what people have gone through. Can we talk a little bit about the impact that that had on you early on in your life, immediately following, and how you coped? What were your coping mechanisms without having the educational background that you do now? What were you doing?
I actually was in high school at the time,
Hmm.
and I wasn't really equipped with the knowledge or the coping skills or things like that to get through it. Like right now, my daughter is 13, about to turn 14. And I think about it because that's the age that this started with me.
Sure.
So I have that one on one understanding of, wow, okay, that's what I was like when I was at that age. And wow, it's a little weird, right? Because I actually went through it at that age, which is interesting. At that time, I just thought I was doing what I had to do in order to survive. I thought I was doing what I needed to in order to feel loved. Sadly, it lasted for a good 4.5 years, 4.5, 5 years. And it didn't end until I went to college. And I really didn't know any different. I thought that her continuously abusing me was what I had to do in order to really feel love and feel valued and feel worthy. That was a really hard reality to accept when I realized that that was not the case and that people aren't actually treated like that. Coming from a younger perspective, I didn't understand that. And it wasn't really until I got to college and I was talking to one of my friends outside on the dorm steps, and I told her about it. And that's the first time I'd ever really told anybody,
Mm.
because my abuser was very adamant about not telling anybody. And when I tried to go to people, when I tried to tell people at school or friends or otherwise, she literally would fake a heart attack, would
Uh-oh.
try to kill herself in front of me, would do all kinds of things that would kind of keep me looped into it all. So it was
Mhm.
all just, I really feel like she was a mastermind of abuse. And she pulled on every string that she possibly could. And when I want to tell so and so no, and fall to the ground, literally, like acting like she was having a heart attack. So
Wow.
it was really pretty intense, and I was at a really highly influenced stage of life. And I was trying to also figure out who I was. And so, I mean, I am a lesbian, I'm an out lesbian. And at that time, though, the fact that she abused me doesn't have, I want to preface this for your listeners too. The fact that I was abused by a female does not have to do with my sexual orientation. My sexual orientation and my sexuality is completely separate. I was a lesbian prior to the abuse and after the abuse. So
Yeah, sure.
I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah.
Um, but, I was trying to figure out my sexuality too during all of that. And it was rough how to express my sexuality. I knew I was a lesbian, but I just didn't know how to express it
Hmm.
and what to do because that's the time of life where your hormones start to pump and you're
Right.
starting
Right.
to go, oh, I have a crush on so and so and all those things.
Yeah.
So it was a very confusing time for me. And then going on into college and then hearing from my friend that, look, that's messed up. That's not right. That's literally what she said. I will always have those words deeply ingrained in my head. That automatically set off something. And I was like, really? Oh, okay. And I know that sounds kind of naive and a little strange, but when you've been through life and you've had that kind of an experience, it's really not that naive. It's honestly, I didn't know any different.
No, it's part of the learning process, especially at that age, going into college. Those are some pretty important developmental
Yeah,
years.
really formative years. So I had that conversation with my friend. I got up the nerve to split things off with this abuser. I will preface it even too that I didn't go to the college that I even wanted to go to because the abuser wanted me to stay close so that I could go and be with her every single weekend. So literally, I would go to school during the week. I would go and I would stay with her on the weekends. Also, she would do things like time me. She knew exactly when I was supposed to be in class, exactly when I was supposed to be back, even timing me going to the bathroom.
Those are extreme power and control issues that she was exhibiting. Again, I'm so sorry you experienced all that. It made such an awful impact on your life to have even altered where you attended school and how you functioned every day.
Yeah.
I'm sure that must have impacted even sleep patterns and thoughts that maybe when you lay down at night and you start to calm yourself down and these floods of intrusive controlling mechanisms are in your life. That's so typical of many, many victims of ongoing sexual abuse. I think it's an important part for those who are listening who haven't experienced something like this to know that the lived experience of a victim survivor of rape and sexual assault is unlike anyone else's.
It's very true. It is very true. Before I jump to the healing part, I'll kind of finish out the rest of the story if that's okay.
Absolutely. I would love that.
So I finally got up the nerve. I was just sobbing hysterically when I called her and I told her, that no, like I'm moving on. Like this is not something I want to be involved in anymore. And this is messed up and all these things. She threw everything in the book at me that she's dying and that she's got some horrible disease. And I mean, just everything in the book and that I can't tell anybody, which is what she just reiterated for years and years and years. And was very adamant, would threaten me if I would tell people, threaten my physical safety, even to the point of trying to hold me down, things of that nature. And she was bigger than I was. I mean, I'm not small, but I'm not big either. And so it was a lot to go through. I finally split things off, and then she started stalking me literally that night, and then that continued on for quite some time and would like stand outside of my dorm and be screaming up at my dorm and crying, come to me, blah, 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 all these things. So I ended up having to move into a room on my own because my roommate was like, this is crazy, which I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I moved into a room on my own, but then again, I was even more isolated. And then one day I went home. I went back to my house. I was raised in Northern Virginia, so it wasn't that far from where I went to school. And I just was grabbing food, grabbing cans, right? That's what college students do. We grab cans and then take them back,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, that and noodles or whatever, things
sure,
like
sure.
that.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. So I was grabbing all those things and I saw that there was a bunch of mail for me. So I grabbed my mail and went back and I was sitting in my dorm one night and I was just doing my mail and I got a bank statement and I looked down at my bank statement and there was no money. There was no money in my bank statement.
Oh my
And
word.
that was my savings from my entire life from my grandparents.
Oh
And
my word.
that was intended to be used to help me pay for my tuition for college. I mean, I was just kind of in disbelief and I ran running out of my dorm and I just was like screaming in the courtyard. How could she do this to me? Just waving, wailing on this bank statement and just how could she do this to me? Screaming and crying. So then I got myself kind of back together, but then I was like, what am I going to do? How am I even going to pay for my tuition? And my tuition was coming due. I knew that that was my agreement with my mom and with my grandparents was that I was going to pay for part of it and it would come out of this money. Over Thanksgiving break, I ended up going home and I knew I had to tell my mom because I didn't have any money. So I sat down with her and I said, Mom, she took all the money from me. And my mom looks at me and she said, somebody told me that she's gay and I hope you're not.
That's a response to having thousands of dollars stolen from you is, I hope
I
you're not.
am. Yeah.
Wow.
And then the attention was more focused on me being gay than on what actually happened. Although I think she definitely has expressed remorse and we're good today. We have a good relationship and things now, but it was tough back then. It was really hard. So it was kind of compounded for me because I had just been through 4.5 years of serious abuse and then having all my money stolen and then having to come out. It was like, are you kidding me? And then to add another layer onto it, because it gets better from here, I went to go and visit different attorneys to try to see if I could recuperate my money. And I had to contact the bank. And the bank, I don't know if people know this or not, but when you go into the ATM, it takes pictures of you. So she had convinced me at one point to store my bank card and my checkbook and told me that she would teach me all about finances and how to balance my checkbook and all these things, these skills that I needed in life, right? And
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
would sit down and she would help me balance my checkbook and show me all these things. And I stored them at her place and she kept them in a filing cabinet there. And so I thought, okay, safe place. This is reasonable. And little did I know she was actually going and stealing all my money. So when I went to go and request all of my bank records, I literally went through page after page after page, and I won't ever forget those images of her standing there, literally taking my money and all of the
Wow.
photos. So I went to attorneys and I said I'd like to do something. And one guy who was extremely ill informed, let's put it that way, he had told me, well, he wasn't ill informed on the law. He just wasn't very gentle in his delivery
Not an
about,
empathic
yeah,
personality.
exactly. And he told me basically that because I was over the age of 18 at that time, and because I was living in Virginia, and the laws in Virginia have changed dramatically now, but back in the day, that I could be prosecuted for being gay if I tried to
You're
press
right.
charges against her, and that she might receive 3 to 5 years for violating me, for abusing me, and that she would likely receive more like 20 years, for stealing all my money. But if I wanted to go down that road, I would have to disclose our relationship, and that there would probably be a lot of press involved. It would be a very public case, and that is it really worth it, basically. At that time, I'll be honest, I was really suicidal. I mean, really suicidal. And I was trying to go to class. I was trying to get myself together and things, but she was still stalking me. She would sit outside of my dorm and, like I said, yell up to me. And then sometimes she would sit in her car right outside of my dorm in the parking lot. And I was just scared to death. I didn't feel like I was safe. Yeah. So I got to this point where I'm already so on edge. I was so bad. The chalk, like the milk of magnesia stuff, I always call it chalk, right? That'll ease your stomach. It was so bad. It literally burned a hole and I developed a severe ulcer and I could not eat or sleep or drink anything except for the milk of magnesia for days. I would literally carry it to class with me. I would have it sitting on my desk. I would be in class and just downing that all day because it was the
Yeah.
only way that I could survive. I lost a tremendous amount of weight. I became skinny as a rail. I very, very depressed, highly stressed out, and it was a horrific experience.
Yeah, for sure.
So I found an attorney with the ACLU, and he was also gay. And so he understood my situation. This was back in the days when being LGBTQIA was not so accepted.
Right, right.
And I'm not trying to date myself, but I'm 49, so it was a while ago. I reached out to somebody with the ACLU. He was really helpful in terms of saying, yes, it's true under law I could be prosecuted for being gay under Virginia law, but that he could do something to help me get my stuff back, basically. So he wrote a letter to her and just explained, look, you need to get back Asher's stuff and you need to bring it to my office because I didn't want to have obviously any contact or anything like that. And then he requested the money back. And then what she did in retaliation was she wrote a letter basically saying that she's not going to pay things back, that if I moved forward with anything, that she would sue me for defamation. So the way in which it got resolved is that she brought my stuff back to his office and I picked it up, and that was the end of that. Unfortunately, nothing legal ever occurred, and I never was able to press charges.
Wow. So you got material possessions back, but no financial
Right.
recovery. That is sad and horrific. At what point did all of the harassment, the stalking, the contact, how did that resolve?
So once he initiated the letter, she pretty much stopped. I think she realized that, okay, this is not going to be worth my time and effort. So then she stopped around that
Yeah.
time.
Some of that is classic power and control tactics, but some of it goes way beyond psychologically into some of the perpetrator mentality that I think a lot of victims and survivors deal with. And it's not like they sit down and study books on how to be a perpetrator. It's just that
Right.
there are patterns in psychological responses of the way people grow up and the way they manipulate and learn to take advantage of other people. You talked about the grooming process, which
Right.
is a typical perpetrator mentality in the beginning stages, and obviously grew and expounded into all of the experiences that you had with this person. And this attorney reached out to her and you got your stuff back finally. Was there any other contact whatsoever? Or have you been free from that totally?
Fortunately, I've been free from that.
That's
I
good.
know a lot of people who have not been free after
Mhm.
that, but fortunately for me, I was free.
Wow, Dr. Asher, that is just, again, I can't emphasize enough how terribly sorry I am for all of that experience. And I think that's an important part for my listeners to hear too, is that part of the survivor community is learning how to understand someone else's experience and separate it from our own,
Yeah.
but also feel that same empathic feeling that we would want from other people.
Absolutely.
And so in that healing process, was there any type of empathic expression from anyone besides, for instance, this attorney who helped you in some degree? What other empathic experiences did you have from those around you that may have helped you in your healing process?
Unfortunately, a lot of my experience was on my own.
Mm,
And I think that happens a lot with survivors, which is
very
also
much
why
so.
I'm mentioning it. I
Hmm.
did have someone who was just awesome and very kind to me. And she was director of our women's center on our campus at that time. And she was very kind in that she would sit with me almost every night because she knew I was just in such a bad place.
Wow.
And
That's powerful right there.
we would watch baseball on one of these old TVs. We had the big clunky old TVs, right?
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
like trying to adjust the antenna just to
Yeah.
get to go in.
To get that static to go away
I
and
know some
the
of the younger
glitching.
listeners are probably like, "What was
Yeah.
that? Like the 1920s?" Yeah, no, it actually happened in my lifetime. Believe it or not.
Yeah. You,
Um,
you talk about being dated. I remember black and white television. So,
See, so do I. Yes. We would sit up in the women's center and, we would watch baseball. She was a big baseball fan and she also did some teaching and things on the side. And so she would watch baseball. I would watch baseball with her. Honestly, that's what kind of got me through the immediate part of it. And then I did proceed on and was in intensive talk therapy for a very long time. I had a lot of folks who were helpful as far as that was concerned. And one therapist in particular, like I saw her on and off for, I don't know, most of my life, I would say, at this point. And she's just an amazing person. And I don't know if I would have made it through without her, to be honest. So I'm very thankful for her. I mean, she's just absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And then around, I would say like 6 years ago or so, 6.5 years ago, I was doing what's called EMDR. Do you
Yeah.
want me to explain it for listeners?
Well, I'm sure there are listeners who are what, but we've talked about it on this show before, and I'm a strong believer in it. It's somewhat of a I don't know if it's new anymore, but it's somewhat still controversial to some. But I think it's a powerful therapy. Yeah, if you'd like to talk about it, I think it'd be great for people.
It's EMDR. It's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
EMDR, and that has been instrumental for me. I know that there are mixed reviews of it,
Mm-hmm.
but that's been completely instrumental for me getting through my process. So talk therapy is great. And I love talk therapy. It definitely helps, right? What I think happened with me, to be honest, is that at some point it got into me doing more cognitive bypassing in talk therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So where I was basically taking what happened and logicking it out,
Right.
as opposed to like feeling it in a more embodied way.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really rooted in my body at that point, and I didn't really want anything to do with my body at that point. So I just tried to logic, and everything was thinking, 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 and anything that was related to feeling. I didn't want to have anything to do with feelings. I didn't want to have anything to do with any kind of embodied sense of anything. And so the EMDR, what it did for me was one, it really neutralized the situations, which was very helpful because I had talked to very, very, very few people and told them what happened up until that point. And some of my friends and stuff didn't even know until I was in my 40s. Going through EMDR and kind of having it all come back up, and in EMDR, you have to almost like relive it, which is tough, but it's a very short period of time. And there's also brain spotting now. I've not tried brain spotting, but I've heard wonderful things about it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I've had another guest who went through that and raves about it. Yeah. It's an important process too.
yeah, I might try that at some point. But EMDR has really been the game changer for me. What it did for me was allow me to really come into my emotions. And it was interesting too because I was in EMDR and talk therapy at the same time.
Oh.
And my talk therapist was she's like, what's going on? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you're way more expressive than what you have ever been in the 20 plus years that she had known me. And so I was really able to start feeling and tolerating my feelings. And that was a big shift for me. And then over the past several years, I took a certificate in trauma energetics coaching. And in doing that, it relies a lot on somatic work.
Right.
And
Right.
so I learned how to do more of the somatic work in terms of coming into my body. And I'm going to tell you, like before I started this work, this was during COVID. And of course, we were all on our own, and that's a different trauma. But while I was doing, during COVID, I would get on and I became a member of some different communities and things online, and just to have community and to be able to learn, because one of the things is I learned how to not have healthy relationships as a
Yeah.
result of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so during COVID, I was taking these relationship courses and became a member of this community during that process. And during one session one day, they were talking about self massage. And I completely freaked out just even at the idea of self massage.
Mm-hmm.
You have got to be kidding me. No, I just wanted to scream, rip my skin off, and run.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And over time, I got to a point where I started to just imagine being in my own body and what that would feel like, but I could only do it for a split second
Wow.
because it was just that traumatic to
Yeah.
even try to.
So activating.
And so I continued to work on it, and I got to a point where I'm learning to think about it. or to even entertain the idea of it, right? Because anytime I think about it, I get like the willies. I'd be like, ugh. I mean, literally, I'd have like a visceral reaction. I would
Sure.
be like, ugh. And it took a long time, but I got to a point where I could like touch my hand and be okay. And then it got to a point where I could start to feel my feelings. Are they in my throat or in my stomach? Or
Mm-hmm.
start to tune into those kinds of things.
Right.
And so I really started to create inner safety within myself. And that was the big turning point in my journey. And what I figured out is that that inner safety started with self forgiveness because I had blamed and shamed myself for so long for what happened that I couldn't even stand to look in the mirror at myself.
Wow.
And once I started to name that shame and name the blame, it took all the power away from both of those. As soon as I started to articulate it, then as I was articulating it and naming it, then I realized, wow, there's so much here from me to forgive before I can even enter into the realm where I could start forgiving anybody else or where anybody else could forgive me or anything. I focused a lot on how do I just become okay with me and forgive myself? And so then the next piece came in where I had to start granting myself permission.
Mm.
And that started with the process of learning to grant myself permission to forgive myself. I would have to repeat that every day, all day. Something would happen at work, something would happen with my dog or with the house or with my ex or with whomever. And
Mm-hmm.
I would immediately go into shame. And so coming out of that, I'm learning to grant myself permission to forgive myself. And that
Yeah.
I did the best that I could in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. And I'm doing the best I can right now. That took a long time. I'm not gonna lie.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
and
With
yeah,
all you'd been through, that is not a surprise.
yeah,
Yeah.
takes a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then that really developed into attunement because once I had that permission to even be in my body and grant myself permission to be in my body, then I really started to attune to myself, attuned to my body, attuned to my emotions. And it wasn't all just at once. This is a very iterative cycle. I still go back and I still go to self forgiveness. I still go to permission. I still go to attunement. But I really was able to attune to my body and then to occupy it, to actually feel safe within my own body. And that was amazing.
Dr. Asher, can I interrupt this process of
Yes,
how
please.
your evolution and ask you, would you explain to the audience how that attunement process works? What you're specifically speaking of when you say attunement? I have a good idea based
Yeah.
on some of my background and research, but I'd like maybe to put it into layman terms for you, what that means. I think
Yeah.
it's important for the audience to hear that.
I'm going to try to explain this. And if I don't explain it as clearly, let me know. All
Sure.
right. So we all are born, we all have an essential core self.
Mm-hmm.
And that is who we come into this world as. That is always a part of us. So what happens with trauma is that it tends to fragment us
Right.
and break it into pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So that then in the morning when we wake up, what we're doing is we're automatically putting on our trauma lenses and we see the world and everything else through those trauma lenses. And it's not just us. It's not just our mind. It is who we are. Our biological system views everything through that lens. So
Right.
if there's something minor that happens, then our brains could turn that into something larger. So, for example, right, we could get scared because somebody runs a red light. Automatically, that might trigger something in our brains that sends us into fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And that is a nervous system reaction.
Right.
That is not from our core self. That is something that we were born with, that our biology we're wired with. We come into
Mm-hmm.
this world having our biology, and it's there for a reason because we had to stay alive
It
and
keeps us alive. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
survive.
Yeah,
So if
absolutely.
some like wild animal jumped in front of us, we needed to be able to book it and run, right?
The job of
And
the brain is to keep us alive. Absolutely.
Exactly. And so it's really a survival response, that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and our body goes into that. But that is not our core essential self. That is not who we are. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I am talking about attunement, and it's hard because I think a lot of survivors just stay in that survival response mode for their
Yes,
life,
there you are stuck. Mm-hmm.
and they could live their entire life like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's challenging to get out of them.
Yeah, it's not an easy task.
And so attunement is learning how to reconnect with that core part of who you are. And then to learn over time, and this might be a lifetime, how to integrate all of those fragments back into that core. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. It's a great explanation. I think part of that attunement process too, and another aspect of shame that I've learned through my research and studying and reading about shame in and of itself, and how shaming rape and sex assault can be on ourselves. A phrase that I don't think many people relate to or hear very much anymore. I used to, but that is the term of self-love. And I think that's a huge part of what you're talking about, giving yourself permissions, allowing yourself some of that somatic touching of your own hand and the realization of your whole physical, psychophysiological makeup and learning what that feels like to be yourself. Does that resonate with you also in the terms of what you're talking about?
Absolutely. It definitely resonates. And I think attunement also goes into some of the biology as well. It's not just connecting in the mind with the self and your essential self, but it's also connecting with your body.
And
And
some
like,
homeostasis kind of aspects
yeah,
of what you're talking about. What feels good to us temperature wise, what feels good to us comfort wise, like just sitting in a chair and making yourself feel comfortable in that chair. There's a lot to that physical aspect of psychophysiological attunement, right?
yes, yes. And what you're describing is beautiful. So there's definitely more external experiences, like what's the temperature, what feels comfortable, and then there's also more embodied experiences of
Mm-hmm.
being able to feel, okay, how is this impacting my nervous system? What's happening?
Right.
And being so attuned that you know what signs or symbols or things that are happening in your body. So, for example, like me and a lot of people, when I get triggered, we do have control over how we respond to it. And I think that that's where people don't think that we do. We do have control over how we respond to being triggered. And I want to just iterate that point. For example, I can control before I go into a full blown trauma response or survival kind of response, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I notice, for example, that my jaw will go like this, right?
Mm-hmm. There's clenching and
My
tightening up.
shoulders, I wear them like earrings.
Yeah.
My stomach gets all clenched up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
with where I am with attunement, I can literally notice in my body if something is not landing right. I notice a slight change and I'll go, oh, something just kind of clamped up in my throat. And I'll literally go, what's going on here? The thing that is important is that you don't shut it down and judge it, like what's happening and dismiss it and move on. Like, oh, this is crazy, right? You really acknowledge it and then you ask questions, like even of that part of your body, which I know sounds kind of wooey. And I'm a scientist, but it's part of the healing process, especially for sexual trauma survivors to like notice when you're going like this, when your fists are clenching, when your jaw is going, and like kind of just go get curious about it in your mind. Like, what's
Right.
happening?
It's almost like a multi-pronged aspect of what you're talking about. There's learning what that response is initially, the clenching of
Right.
the jaw, the tightening of the shoulders, the stomach clenching, the little beads of sweat that may break out on your forehead, your palms getting clammy and cold and sweaty. There's a learned response too in that process of recognizing those, of how to react and
Right.
reacting appropriately. And those are coping mechanisms. And those coping mechanisms, again, going back to the research says the more coping mechanisms you develop, successful, good, healthy coping mechanisms, the better you will be in life in general. It's those people who have one coping mechanism or two coping mechanisms of just blowing up out of anger or striking out at someone or climbing up and going into a shell and staying there. No, it's a learning method of understanding that there are multiple coping mechanisms that we can choose from,
Yes.
and to try to avoid the unhealthy ones and stick with the healthy ones that make us feel good. Many people call this mindfulness.
Right. Exactly. And I would say that mindfulness is fairly interchangeable with attunement. I think attunement
Mhm.
adds a little bit more of the embodiment
Uh,
aspect of it.
the somatic aspects.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Some more of the somatic pieces of actually being in your body and being attuned to shifts within your body and
Right.
why things are shifting. Right.
Hmm.
I think mindfulness is more, being aware, but not necessarily encapsulating the embodiment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
important. Thank you for diverting to that. I think that's been very helpful.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting now is that I can catch it. There's still times where I don't. Of course, I'm human. But I can typically catch it and go, okay, my body's going into survival mode right now, and
Hmm.
literally name it. And then what you were saying, have toolkits, have tools to get out of it before I go into a complete survival state. I agree with you. The more tools that you have, the better, because sometimes some tools will work and other times they won't work at all. So I love to call it my little toolbox that I carry around with me everywhere all the
Hmm.
time. And I'll try one thing. Okay, that's not working. Let's try this one over here. And I think that's also part of what can be challenging about being a survivor, too, is that building up that toolkit and that level of attunement or awareness or mindfulness, what you would like to call it, but also it's being able to access that, being able to stop yourself enough to actually stop the whole biological pattern from occurring
Hmm.
and rerouting, re-networking. There's something called neuroplasticity, and our brains are just constantly rewiring. And so the more that we are able to stop it, it might be really hard at first, but then as you become aware of it and it keeps happening over time, then you can literally re-network your
That's
brain.
absolutely correct. And I was going to even mention that. So you threw that word out there, that neuroplasticity. It's there, whether you understand it or not. It's happening. But to have a grasp of the neuroscience of what the brain does, especially with trauma and trauma recovery, I think is an important aspect of learning who we are and learning, like you said, what all these terms mean and what those coping mechanisms can be. But you also nailed it a little while ago when you said this takes time. This is not something you can just, oh, I'm now learning about neuroplasticity. I'm now learning about mindfulness and attunement. Doesn't mean the next day you've got it mastered and that, oh, now that I know about it, I'm fine. No, it takes multiple years of practice and ongoing practice too. Like you said too, it's something you catch yourself doing, and sometimes you catch it and sometimes you don't.
Right.
Sometimes you respond correctly, sometimes you don't. So circumstance determined. What's your current circumstance, and where are you in your mood? How much sleep have you had? How awake are you? How
Yeah,
healthy are you? How well are you eating? There are so many aspects that go into self care. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think what it comes down to is, and this is something that can be very challenging for survivors, is that the more you can pause and you can do those things, the less you're living in the past or in the future, and the more you're just staying present. So the more you can just stay here, right now, one moment at a time. That's all you need to do. That's it. No judgment. Try to remove the judgment. And you know what? If the judgment starts to come in, because it will, what I used to do, I'll be honest, it's kind of a little goofy, but it worked for me. I used to imagine putting up a stop sign, literally. And I was like, you are not welcome here. No, no, turn around, march away. It comes back to that iterative process, right? Self forgiveness. I got triggered a week ago and oh, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have handled it in that way. Yeah, because I was definitely triggered and I wasn't realizing that I was triggered, but I actually really was in retrospect. Okay. So I could go down different paths. I could beat myself up for that. I could go to that person and I mean, I didn't lash out or anything, but and I wasn't mean. I just would have responded differently had I been in a more present place. And I was like, I could go and I could justify my actions because I think there's also a need that survivors feel to justify everything because we're not rooted within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is out here
Yeah.
as opposed to being in here. So once you can start rooting from in here as opposed to out here, you're much more solid and stable and secure. I could have gone to that person and justified everything, which is what I would have done in the past. Or I can just, hey, I wasn't feeling comfortable with that at that moment. End of story. I don't need to justify. I can say how I feel, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I don't have to process.
I'm going to make a leap because I think this is a great place for you to talk more about the upcoming summit. Will some of this come out in the summit? And how do people, again, get involved in that? How would they sign up? And remind everyone about the date and
Yes.
time.
Yes. So it is called the Soul Care for Self-Care Summit. It is not only for sexual trauma survivors, but also, again, for those people who support us. So it
That's
can
great.
be family, friends, providers, whomever is good. It is going to occur on March 14th. It is going to be on Zoom, and it is from 12 until 4:30 Eastern Time. And like I said, there will be a recording, but we do ask for a donation for that recording so that we can continue to do this work. I am involved with an organization, and they are also helping me with doing some of this work, which is great. I have another partner in crime, if you will, who is also helping me. And we do have some community sponsors too, which is also lovely. So, how you would get involved is, if you're okay with it, I will share a flyer with you, and then you can literally go and click and scan on the barcode. It'll bring up an Eventbrite invitation, and then you just click to sign up. It's pretty easy.
It sounds like what you're talking about is something I can put in the episode notes for this episode that people could
Yeah, we can put a link to it. That would
put a
be
link. That would be
great.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah, we can put a link to it, and then the flyer will pop up, and then, or we can just put a link straight to Eventbrite.
that would be great.
And then you can just go and register for free if you want to attend live. We look forward to seeing you. And what I will say is that this is going to be a really special event. This is, to my knowledge, the only one that I've been able to see that has been out there in this respect. So we have a speaker who's going to be doing Clifton Strengths. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there's a whole Clifton system, and it tells you all about what your strengths and weaknesses are, if you
Nice.
will. But it builds really on your strengths and helps you to to know yourself on another level, which will be lovely. And the person who's doing that is also trauma informed and does this strengths building in a trauma informed way. Also, we'll have a person there who is also a coach who works with sexual trauma survivors and who has a pretty big following. And she will be there, and she is going to do a whole thing on the trauma brain, which will be fascinating because then we can dive even deeper into some of the things that we talked to you about here. We have another person who also is highly skilled in terms of trauma coaching and embodiment and somatic pieces. So she is going to be doing some education components and nervous system kinds of education components, as well as some somatic exercises, which will be great.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I am going to be talking about some of the current affairs, not in terms of what's actually happening, but in terms of how our bodies are reacting to what is happening.
The impact of what's going on around us socially and in world events, things like that.
Yes. I'm going to be talking about and showing people some exercises about how we can regulate ourselves during this time.
So good. Wow.
So it's going to be a powerhouse event.
It sounds
I'm
like it.
super excited. In between sessions, we're going to have some reflection and things. Folks can show up. They don't have to be on camera. They don't have to say a word. You can do whatever feels comfortable for you. We're just happy to have you and just happy to be in community with you. And if pieces feel great, feel good, go for it. If they don't, no worries. Just want to be in community with folks.
I am so happy to be able to help promote that through this podcast. And I hope many, many, many of my listeners tune into that. I know I'm going to be there. So
Oh, that's
thank
great.
you. Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
excited for it. I love listening to you talk about it. It's inspiring and makes me want to be there. So absolutely.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
thanks
I
for telling us
appreciate
about it.
that. Yeah, this is my brainchild, and
Nice.
it came out of again me just feeling like I was navigating everything on my own, and I'm like, I don't want people to feel that way. So how about we just bring everybody into a big summit and
Yeah.
just all be in community together?
Yeah.
So,
We need to have you back. Um,
oh, I would love to come back. Thank you.
that would be great. I would
It
love
would
for
be
you
an
to be
honor.
back. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Well, not only will I be at the summit, and I hope many of my listeners are, but a few months down the road, we'll check back in and see where you're at and what you're doing and get you back on another episode. I'd love that. Yeah.
That would be wonderful. I really appreciate it. And I thank you so much for having me today and for offering to promote the summit to the listeners. I really hope it's a great event for everyone.
And your upcoming book, I hope you
Yes.
keep in touch with me and let me know how that's coming along. Maybe the timing would be right that we can talk about the book when you come back, and maybe it'll be close to being out or it'll be out. We'll figure that out.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. Asher, what will you do when we're done talking today to immediately take care of yourself? You probably have experienced those implicit memories that pop up when we talk about explicit memories, things that we know happened. And then all of a sudden we go, oh, I'd forgotten about this.
Mhm.
And there it is. And again, can activate our response system that puts us into a trauma response. What will you do if anything like that comes up, and how will you go through the rest of your afternoon and evening in responding to what we've done here today?
Thank you. I think that is such an awesome question, and I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate the opportunity to answer it. So, what I do prior to and after everything that I do, I have a bit of a ritual, right? So, in advance of talking, I prepare my body to be able to not go into a trauma response. So, how I do that is I do some somatic exercises to help prepare that. But then the one thing that I always say to myself before I talk about my trauma is I'm safe.
Hmm.
I'm here, I'm present, and I'm safe.
Yeah.
And then I tell my body, it's okay, you're safe. You are choosing to talk about this. Because then once you tell your body that you're choosing to talk about it, your body lets go of the trauma response.
Yeah. It's a truth that I'm glad you brought out. So yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
that's
no.
important. Really good.
Thank And then on the back end, what I do, again, this seems a little wooey, but
Mhm.
I literally scrape it off my body. Literally go through my entire body like this, and I
Yeah.
scrape it all off. And I just let it all go. And then I do a bit of a centering kind of ritual, right?
Hmm.
Which is I put one hand on my chest and one hand on my belly, and I just relax into that and breathe into that. And then I say, this is me. This is me. And I really ground myself in who I am and in everything that I've done. And then if something comes up during that time, then I'll push it away and I'll just say, that's you. This is me. That's you.
That sounds amazing. Yes, sounds super powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that ritual with us. It's something I think, even if you aren't deeply educated in all of what you've been talking about, it's something someone could apply right now. Breathing is an amazing aspect of calming oneself and getting out of one mindset and into another. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that hand on the chest, hand on the belly is also another critically important part of grounding yourself and recognizing who you are.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much. So good. I'm thrilled that you were with us today. And I do. I look forward to the summit and I look forward to having you back.
Thank you so much. This has been quite an honor and I look forward to coming back.
Thank you. That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I want to thank Dr. Asher for coming on and leaning into a conversation that doesn't always make people comfortable, but absolutely needs to be had. What I appreciate about her work is that it doesn't sit on a shelf or stay inside academic language. It shows up in the places where decisions are made and where people are most vulnerable, inside institutions, leadership spaces, and especially in those fragile moments right after someone discloses and is quietly trying to figure out whether they are safe. Her work meets people there, where response matters most. We talked about something that often gets overlooked, the reality that systems can unintentionally repeat harm when they don't understand how trauma actually works in the body. Not because people are evil, but because they're uninformed. And there's a difference. Dr. Asher challenges institutions to close that gap, to slow down, and to recognize that trauma responses don't always look the way the training manuals say they should, and to respond in ways that protect dignity instead of undermining it. If you're in a position of leadership, this episode isn't abstract. It's practical. It's about whether the environment you influence feels safe to someone carrying the weight of sexual trauma. And if you're a survivor listening right now, I hope you heard something that affirmed you, that your reactions make sense, that your body responded the way it needed to, and that none of that is a flaw. If this conversation resonated with you, share it. Send it to someone who has decision-making power. These discussions only shift culture when they move beyond the people who already agree. Finally, as I close out this episode, let me remind you to do your part to help bring justice to victims and survivors. A great way to do this is to start by believing and to help normalize the conversation about the realities of rape and sexual assault, because the truth is, we all know someone who's experienced rape or sexual assault. We'll see you next week.